The Wyoming Territory lay dry and wind-burned under a blazing August sun. Dust blew across the open land like it had nowhere else to go. The town of Bitter Creek sat at the foot of red cliffs, just 23 tired wooden buildings that looked ready to give up. Inside the boarding house, Margaret Callaway stood in the dim parlor, her black mourning dress soaking up every bit of light. At 23, she still carried a quiet beauty, but hardship had carved deep lines of worry around her eyes. Her hands were rough now, nothing like the soft hands she once had. 6 months had passed since the mine explosion took her husband, James, and left her with nothing but debts and unwanted pity. Mrs. Holbrook, the sharp-tongued owner of the boarding house, stood in front of her with her arms folded like a judge ready to deliver a sentence. "It's settled," she said. Mr. Thornton agreed to the arrangement. "The ceremony is this Sunday." Margaret's fingers clutched the chair until her knuckles turned white. "I haven't agreed to anything," she whispered. Mrs. Holbrook let out a dry laugh. "Your account is 3 months overdue. No family to send money. No work left in town. Winter's coming, dear. I can't keep you for free." The other women in the room avoided Margaret's eyes. They were not here to help her. They were here to get rid of a problem. Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, cleared her throat. "Samuel Thornton owns 400 acres in Wolf Valley, runs horses and cattle. A woman could do worse." Margaret knew the truth beneath those soft voices. Samuel Thornton was a man who kept to himself. A man whose first wife had died under circumstances no one talked about. A man known for his silence and his hard ways. "He agreed to pay your debts," Mrs. Holbrook continued. She listed every dollar as if she were reading a death sentence. $70 altogether. $70. Margaret felt the weight of it crush her. "I just need more time," she begged. "I can take in more washing. I can—" "There's no more work," Miss Crane, the schoolteacher, said gently. "The railroad crews moved on. This town barely survives as it is." Quote, Margaret realized then that there would be no mercy. "When may I meet Mr. Thornton?" she asked, her voice small. "He'll be here Sunday," Mrs. Holbrook said. "He's not the courtin' kind. Don't expect flowers." Pastor Patterson entered the room and nodded sadly. "Mrs. Callaway, I trust the arrangements have been explained." Margaret didn't answer. She slipped out the back door into the blinding afternoon heat, tears burning her eyes as she headed for the wash shed. She plunged her hands into the warm water and scrubbed clothes that did not belong to her, trying to hold back the sob rising in her throat. 6 months ago she had dreamed of children and a ranch of her own with James. Now she was being traded like stock to a man she had never met. When Sunday arrived, the sky burned red like a warning. Margaret dressed in her old gray wool dress and walked to the church, aware of every eye watching her. Her life was being decided in front of the entire town. Sam Thornton waited at the altar. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and silent as stone. His gray eyes were cold and unreadable. When he looked at her, it wasn't with affection. It was the look of a man examining something he had paid for. The ceremony felt unreal. The pastor's voice faded into a distant hum. Margaret answered when she was told to, her voice barely a whisper. When the pastor asked if anyone objected, the silence pressed around her like a trap. Then came her turn. "Do you, Margaret Rose Callaway, take this man?" Margaret looked out the window. The open land stretched endlessly, freedom so close, yet impossibly far. "I'm not ready," she whispered as tears spilled over. Sam's hand closed around her elbow, firm and final. "You are now," he murmured, only for her to hear. "She does," he said aloud. The pastor quickly finished the ceremony, relieved it was over. There was no kiss, no smile. Sam simply took Margaret's arm and led her out into the harsh sunlight where a wagon waited. Her trunk was already loaded. He helped her onto the seat with surprising gentleness, then took the reins. Margaret did not look back as the town of Bitter Creek faded behind them. Hours passed in silence as they crossed the lonely land toward Wolf Valley. Margaret's eyes filled as she tried to swallow the truth. She was now Mrs. Samuel Thornton, married to a stranger who hadn't even tried to hide his indifference. When the ranch came into view, her heart sank. The house was made of weathered logs, its few small windows dark and cold. No flowers, no warmth. It looked like a place built for survival, not for living. "This is it," Sam said, stopping the wagon. He carried her trunk inside and pointed toward a small bedroom. "I'll be in the barn," he said. "Supper at 6." He left without another word. Margaret stood alone in the quiet house, the weight of her new life pressing down on her like the thick Wyoming heat. She had crossed a line there was no coming back from, and nightfall would bring the moment she feared most. Margaret stood in the small kitchen, her hands trembling as she tried to light the stove. The house felt too quiet, the air heavy with dread. She cooked beans and biscuits the best she could, but her heart wasn't in it. When Sam returned at sundown, he washed at the pump and walked inside without a word. He sat at the table, ate in silence, then pushed his plate away. "It'll do," he said. "You'll learn." Margaret swallowed hard. She wasn't used to such bluntness, but she didn't argue. When he stood and carried his plate to the basin, her pulse quickened. She knew what was coming next. "I rise at 4, he said. "Breakfast at 5. I'll be in the north pasture tomorrow." He walked to the bedroom doorway. "Come to bed." Her chest tightened. I need to clean the dishes first. "They'll keep till morning." She followed him, each step heavier than the last. In the bedroom, he removed his boots and shirt, the moonlight catching old scars across his back. She undressed quietly and slid beneath the quilt. She felt him climb in beside her. For a moment, there was silence. Then his hand touched her shoulder. "I know you're not ready," he said, voice low in the dark, "but you're my wife now." Margaret closed her eyes, trying to hold back tears. Sam wasn't rough, but he wasn't gentle either. He moved with the same quiet, practical nature he showed in everything he did. When it was over, he turned away and soon fell asleep. Margaret lay awake for hours, staring at the moonlight on the wall, wishing she could disappear into it. Morning came too soon. Sam left before dawn, his boots crunching across the yard. Only then did she rise. She washed in cold water, trying to scrub away the memory of the night. She forced herself to make breakfast, though she couldn't eat a bite. The days fell into a rhythm. Sam left early, returned late. Margaret cleaned, cooked, mended clothes, gathered eggs, learned the stubborn stove, and tried not to cry when the loneliness became too much. They spoke very little. At night, Sam claimed his marital rights again, never cruel, but never tender. She told herself this was survival. This was the price of shelter, of food, of staying alive. 2 weeks later, Margaret finally stepped outside to breathe air that wasn't trapped behind log walls. The land stretched forever around her, huge, empty, beautiful, in a fierce way. The mountains rose like broken teeth. Wolves howled in the distance at night. The wind carried their voices across the valley until Margaret pulled the quilt tighter around herself, just to feel less alone. When Sam finally took her into town for supplies, the silence hit Margaret harder than any storm. People she once knew looked past her like she wasn't there. Women whispered as she walked by, some with pity, others with judgment. Mrs. Patterson greeted her with false cheer. "Settling in well, Mrs. Thornton?" "Well enough," Margaret said, keeping her voice steady. "That valley gets mighty lonely," another woman said, in a tone that wasn't meant to comfort. Margaret held her chin up. "All changes require adjustment." Sam finished buying supplies and helped her into the wagon. As they rode away, she finally said what she held in her chest. "They pity me." Sam kept his eyes on the trail. "Let them. Their opinions won't feed us." That night, thunder rolled over the valley and lightning split the sky. The storm was unlike anything Margaret had ever felt. Wild, roaring, alive. Sam dragged cattle into the barn while hail pounded the roof like fists. He slammed the doors shut and shouted over the wind, "Brace the windows!" They worked together through the chaos, stuffing rags under the door, moving supplies, and praying the roof would hold. When a heavy crash shook the house, Sam grabbed her, pulling her toward the bedroom. "If the roof goes," he began. "It won't," Margaret said fiercely, though she wasn't sure why she believed it. They huddled together in the dark, his arms tight around her. For the first time, being held by Sam didn't feel like a cage. It felt like protection. When morning finally came, Bitter Creek's world looked broken. The barn door was ripped off. The chicken coop shattered. Fences lay scattered like sticks. 3 cattle lay dead in the field. Sam's face hardened as he took it all in. "We've lost 1/3 of the hay," he said softly, "maybe more." "And we can rebuild," Margaret said, steadying herself. "With what?" Sam asked. "We barely had enough as it was." That night, they sat at the table, exhausted. Sam rubbed his hands over his face. "I'll have to go to Morrison." Margaret froze. "No, not him. He's the only one who'll extend credit." "He'll own you." Sam let out a bitter laugh. "As opposed to now? When everything's falling apart anyway, quote." Margaret stood and faced him. "There has to be another way." Sam stared at her, something raw in his eyes. "You sound like Mary." Margaret's breath caught. His first wife. She always believed things would work out. "Did they?" Margaret whispered. "She died believing it," he said quietly. Then he touched Margaret's hand, slowly, carefully, almost as if he feared she'd pull away. "You're not Mary." "You don't have to be." Margaret surprised herself by gripping his hand back. "We'll find a way," she said. "Together." Sam looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Together. That night, in the quiet of the bedroom, his touch was gentler. Not a demand, not a duty, something different. And when wolves howled in the mountains, the sound no longer felt like danger. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had words for. The trouble began quietly, almost too quietly to notice at first. 5 cattle disappeared from the north pasture. Then 3 more vanished near the creek. Tracks led toward Morrison's land before fading into hard ground. Sam's jaw tightened each time he rode back with one less animal. "They're testing us," he said one night, checking his rifle for the 10th time, "seeing how much they can take before we break." Margaret watched him pace the kitchen, worry settling deep in her bones. They had fought storms and loneliness. Now this. "What about the sheriff?" she asked. Sam let out a short, harsh laugh. "Sheriff Dalton? Morrison owns him. He won't lift a finger." Word spread fast. At the store, people whispered as Margaret passed. She brought trouble to the valley. "Thornton's losing everything. Should have stayed widowed." She kept her chin high, but inside her heart cracked. That night, after a long silence, Sam spoke. "I'm riding to the North Valley at dawn. That's where they'll hit next." Quote, "You can't go alone," Margaret said. "That's what they want." Sam hesitated, then shook his head. "I won't put you in danger." "You taught me to shoot," she said. "Let me stand with you." They argued until the stars faded, but Margaret didn't bend. At last, Sam sighed. "Stay hidden unless things go bad," he said. "Promise me." "I promise to do what needs to be done," she replied, which was not a promise at all. Before sunrise, they rode out together. They hid in a rocky bluff overlooking the small herd Sam had set as bait. Hours crawled by. The sun rose high, turning the valley into a shimmering, breathless furnace. Then dust appeared on the horizon. 4 riders thundered toward the cattle. Margaret recognized 2, Daniels and Polk, the same men who had mocked her at the ranch. Sam stood, rifle steady. "That's far enough." The men circled, their grins sharp and mean. "Well, look here," Daniels called. "Thornton thinks he can stop us alone." "Who says I'm alone?" Sam replied. Margaret rose beside him, rifle aimed. Her hands trembled, but her grip was strong. Daniels laughed. "He brought his wife. Isn't that sweet?" The fight exploded like a spark in dry grass. Daniels fired first. The bullet struck stone inches from Sam's head. Sam returned fire, hitting Daniels in the shoulder. Horses reared. Men shouted. The valley shook with gunfire. Margaret aimed at Polk as he lifted his pistol. Her shot went wide, but it made him duck. The other men fired at Sam, bullets sparking off rock. One rider tried to slip around the side. "Sam! Left!" Margaret shouted. Sam turned and shot in one smooth motion. The man tumbled from his horse with a cry. Polk charged her. Margaret rose, steadied her breath, and pulled the trigger. This time, she didn't miss. Polk toppled from his saddle, hitting the dirt hard. The last man dropped his gun and raised his hands. I'm done, quote. "Get Daniels and go," Sam said. "Tell Morrison this is finished." The man hauled Daniels onto a horse. Before he left, Daniels glared back, pain twisting his face. "This ain't over," he hissed. Sam didn't blink. "Then come back and see how it ends," quote. When the riders disappeared, Sam turned to Margaret. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, lowering her rifle, though her hands shook. I think I killed Polk." "You did what you had to," Sam said, pulling her into his arms. She felt him tremble, too. "You saved my life today." They held each other in the hot, silent valley, no longer strangers, no longer bound by necessity, but connected in a way neither had expected. The next morning, riders approached the ranch. Not Morrison's men, but neighbors. Tom Brennan, Pete Carson, and others Sam had barely spoken to in years. "Heard what you did," Brennan said, taking off his hat. 4 against 2, and you ran 'em off." "Margaret did her share," Sam replied proudly, surprising her. The ranchers exchanged looks. "Thornton," Brennan said, "we've all had trouble with Morrison. We've been scared to stand together. But you two showed us it's time." "What are you saying?" Sam asked. "We're forming an alliance," Pete Carson said. "We watch each other's herds, guard each other's land. Morrison can't break us if we stand as one," quote. Sam looked at Margaret. She nodded. "All right," he said, "but if we do this, we do it right." The ranchers agreed. They shook hands. Forming a bond Bitter Creek had not seen in years. From that day forward, everything changed. Margaret was no longer the widow who had been forced into marriage. She was a woman who stood with her husband, fought beside him, and earned the respect of an entire valley. Life grew steady and strong again. Townfolk began to greet her, not with whispers but with nods, some even with smiles. Mrs. Patterson approached her after Sunday service with a soft, hesitant apology. Sarah Patterson visited often, eager to learn from her. The town that once shunned her was learning to admire her. One night, as Sam and Margaret stood outside watching the sunset burn across the sky, he spoke softly. "You changed this place," he said. "Changed me." Margaret leaned against him. "We changed each other." Months passed. Their rebuilt home stood tall, fresh timber, bright windows, a porch where they drank coffee in the cool mornings. The valley began to thrive again. Cattle fattened on new grass, neighbors helped one another, and danger faded like a bad dream. But the biggest change of all happened on a quiet evening, while the air smelled of pine and the sky glowed pink. Sam took her hands. "You married me because you had to," he said, "but now I want to ask proper." He knelt, surprising her so deeply she stopped breathing. "Margaret Callaway Thornton, will you choose me now? Not out of fear, not out of need, but out of love." Tears filled her eyes. She cupped his face with trembling hands. "Yes," she whispered. "I choose you." He kissed her as the first drops of long-awaited rain began to fall around them, soft at first, then steady, like a blessing from the sky. Together they stood in it, arms around each other, finally ready for the life ahead. Against all odds, in a land that tested every soul who dared to live on it, they had found something rare, a home, a future, and a love strong enough to survive anything the West could throw at them.